Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Could you please take your seat? We are about to start. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll just wait for the last couple of people to come in. As we do that, I just wanted to say what an amazing evening that was, organised by EuroDIG last night, the 70s extravaganza. I felt 17 again until 2 o'clock in the morning when I felt like 117. But it was, I think it's also a really important part of these events, these dialogues, is that we're all meeting socially as well and having a good time together. So that's great, and congratulations to the team at EuroDIG led by Giovanni Seppia. Thank you. This is a very, we're absolutely thrilled to introduce the next 3 speakers at EuroDIG here in 2016. So just to reassure you about the format of the session, it's going to be 45 minutes long. We're going to hear from each of the speakers, and then they're going to join for a very short question and answer session. And then we'll go straight into the extra panel. Question and answers from me. No, very short. Very short. Oh, but we hope to maintain the spirit of dialogue here at EuroDIG. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Andrus Ansip, who is the Vice President of the European Commission, responsible for the digital single market. He's also former Prime Minister of Estonia, where he was at one stage the longest-serving Prime Minister in the European Union. Commissioner Ansip, the floor is yours, and welcome. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to join you today to discuss internet governance in Europe. As the world becomes ever more interconnected and globalized, there is little that the internet has not touched or transformed. How this global resource is governed in the future will affect how we use it and how it evolves. The internet is a common good for the benefit of all humanity and of everybody who uses it on an equal footing and not subject to the control of governments. It should be a single, non-fragmented resource base where people enjoy the same rights as they do offline and have the same degree of protection. Everyone who is involved or who has an interest should have their say in how the internet is governed. Governments, companies, organizations, or individuals. It is why the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance is one that we champion and should defend. Europe needs a strong presence and voice in international discussions to make sure that we do so. This year's EuroDIG is an occasion to help us to develop a common European approach as input for the Global Internet Governance Forum that will take place in Mexico in December. The Internet's strength comes from how it is openly and reliably distributed. The world needs it to be stable, secure, and robust. It needs to be accountable and subject to the rule of law. A good test of that model's success will be this year's transition of the IANA function from its supervision by the US government to a global multi-stakeholder model. The European Commission is committed to a successful and timely conclusion of this transition with no unjustified delays. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of the Internet and its governance have never been so high on the political agenda. Good governance is vital for keeping the Internet operating properly. Without it, the digital single market cannot provide Europe's people and businesses with the full opportunities that they deserve from the digital age. It is essential for the continued development of the digital economy, especially as numbers of Internet users around the world continue to rise dramatically. The first billion was reached in 2005, the second billion in 2010, the third billion in 2014, and as discussed at the G7 ministerial meeting in May, our aim is to bring additional 1.5 billion people online by 2020. Our digital single market strategy aims to make sure that all Europeans, people, industry, businesses, get the best from the online world, to open up digital opportunities, to make Europe a world digital leader, to remove barriers, to increase access, to get everyone connected across society and all sectors of the economy. Building the digital single market will take time and will not be easy. There is one aspect which is essential for its success and on which everything else depends: an open internet which is robust, reliable and secure. And it goes way beyond Europe. The internet should remain a dynamic source of growth in the digital economy for everyone to benefit. Together, let us make sure that it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ansip. Please take a seat. I think what we'll do is we'll ask the speakers to come up and then have a conversation together. But want everybody to keep in mind those remarks about the digital single market, particularly after the conversations we had yesterday about geo-blocking. Next, I'd like to invite to the stage the Secretary-General of the Council of Europe, Thorbjørn Jagland. He's also another former Prime Minister, we have several here today, of Norway, and was chair of the committee that awards the Nobel Peace Prize. So I believe it's correct that you also awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to Malala. Is that correct? Secretary-General, please take the stage. The floor is yours. Thank
you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I would like to start by reiterating what Commissioner Ansip said right now, which is something we have to repeat again and again, namely that the strength of the Internet lies in its open and free nature. This is the source of its immense power for positive change, socially transforming the way people connect, politically creating an entirely new means of spreading information, empowering the voiceless and holding the powerful to account. Intellectually, we have never seen such a space for the free flow of ideas and therefore innovation. And of course, economically, there is no knowledge economy without the Internet. According to one study I read recently, if developing economies had the same access as developed ones, it could generate up to 140 million new jobs. And yet, I bet that as you wander around listening to today's debates, you will hear as much about what shouldn't happen online as what should. Because the internet, like all technology, has a dark side too. It is exploited by criminals, terrorists, pedophiles, by states who wish to spy on the citizen, by nasty individuals who hide behind the cloak of anonymity it provides. So I wish to pose a question today. How do we protect all that is good about the internet while containing all that is bad? I believe we must. The internet relies on trust. All of the benefits I have described depend on citizens, entrepreneurs, and companies believing that it is a safe space, where their interest, their privacy, their children, and so on are protected. And while I don't believe that the internet will ever go into reverse, people will never stop using it. I do believe that if trust weakens, people will use it in more guarded ways than they otherwise would, diminishing its potential for good, for democracy, for social evolution, and for economic growth. The answer to misuse of the net is not, of course, heavy-handed regulation. This would kill the internet. But equally, a free internet is not a free for all. An open internet does not mean completely open to abuse. And I believe that there are two key planks to a trusted internet that will continue to command people's confidence. The first is standards. There have to be some rules for what kind of behavior is and isn't permissible online. We are inching towards a system of global governance, incrementally, a piece by piece, but we are a long way from harmonization. Different countries, including in Europe, employ different approaches, meaning that currently how free and open your internet is depends on where you live. And these imbalances are something the Council of Europe is trying to correct. We are Europe's largest intergovernmental organization with 47 member states spanning from Ireland across the Russian Federation and Turkey, and including all the 28 EU member states. We are the guardian of the European Convention on Human Rights, and we have a number of legally binding treaties to protect human rights and the rule of law online. This includes to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation, including grooming, to combat cybercrime, to protect personal data. Now, we are in the process of negotiating clearer rules for criminal justice, access to electronic evidence on cloud servers, and we have a series of recommendations on, for example, e-democracy. But there are gaps, and they need to be filled. A big one is freedom of expression. We don't currently have one clear set of international standards on what governments should do when faced with illegal material. We all agree that it is their duty to take down or block websites which aid terrorism, for example, or contain indecent images of children. But we also have to ensure that the power to remove content is not misused. Therefore, I recently commissioned a study into what currently happens in over 47 member states, and the picture is very worrying indeed. Censorship is a real problem. Some governments are delegating the responsibility for filtering and blocking content to administrative authorities, which can interpret it too widely. Some have used counter-terror laws to silence their opponents. Some governments are leaving the decision about what to filter and block almost entirely to private companies, who are not always best placed to judge the difference between free speech, which may be offensive, but is still a person's right, and hate speech, which includes inciting others to violence and may be a crime. Now, for this reason, I was pleased to see that the European Commission's new code of conduct with industry to remove hate speech contained an explicit reference to the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights, whose case law is indispensable in this regard. This patchwork of responses, some of them contrary to fundamental freedoms, is not good for trust. So the Council of Europe is now going to create one set of common standards to empower European governments to tackle illegal content while safeguarding free speech. And as with all these things, its impact will depend on political will, so urge your governments to give this their full support. Second, in addition to the right rules, we need responsibility. And here, I want to make a direct appeal to industry. More than anyone, the tech companies and business operating online depend on trust on internet users. It is in their clear self-interest to maintain it. And if they do not, they must beware the reactionary and heavy hand of state interference if and when in the future things go wrong. Regulating the internet is very much like regulating the press. Outside of authoritarian or anti-democratic regimes, no one wants to see governments or even independent bodies impose themselves too heavy. The best way to stop this is if private actors are seen to act in the public good. And on that point, before I finish, there is one specific issue I would like to highlight relating to child abuse online. At the Council of Europe, we have a body called the Lanzarote Committee, whose job it is to evaluate the degree to which member states are meeting their obligations, as set out in the Lanzarote Convention, which criminalizes child sexual abuse and exploitation. One issue they are looking at is the persistence of website addresses which openly refer to child abuse material. In its annual report, the Internet Watch Foundation says that last year it found new domain names being used to share child sex abuse imagery for the first time. Many appeared to have been registered specifically for that purpose. And of course, preventing the abuse itself is the priority. But the fact that these criminals are able to parade their vile acts so shamelessly is unacceptable. An important part of taking a zero tolerance to child abuse is saying, no, you cannot blatantly advertise your horrific crimes. In some places, we see domain names registries taking an assertive approach to screening and identifying domain names which signal or encourage these offenses, informing law enforcement and having them suspended or deregistered, including with the help of NGOs. I know that ICANN has also taken steps in this direction in recent years. This morning I spoke with their CEO, Göran Marby, about what more can be done. It is incredibly important that more is being done in order to take on these things, because it is about trust in the internet itself, but it is also about horrific crimes being done out there, and also incitement to crimes through that kind of websites. I think it will send an important signal about the kind of place we want the internet to be if more public authorities and bodies involved in the registration process now take a clear and united stance. And with that, I finish. I'm lucky to share the floor today with two speakers who agree with me that the internet should remain open and free. The question for all of us is how we protect the best bits while mitigating the worst. How do we establish the rules and the responsibility needed to maintain trust? I think this is the crucial issue. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Secretary General. Thank you, Secretary General Jagland, for those remarks, and we will pick up some of the themes after the next speaker. It's my great pleasure to introduce the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, Marina Kaljurand. She's a career diplomat and has also served as ambassador to Moscow amongst her many other accomplishments. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you, and as next host as well of EuroDIG. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you, Emily, for a very kind introduction, and I have to echo what you said at the beginning. Yesterday evening was great. Giovanni, wherever you are the best blonde Elvis. As I said yesterday in the audience publicly, and I'd like to confirm, yes, Estonia will host the next EuroDIG, so you are most welcome to join us next year in Tallinn. Dear Vice President, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, it is my utmost honor and pleasure to address the European Friends of Internet and Digital Development here today. I would like to stress that the eyes of all Europe, and not only, are directed to us these days, because EuroDIG is the biggest and most valuable platform for open discussion on internet governance, freedom, digital market and cybersecurity in Europe by all stakeholders together. I'm here today as a foreign minister of the country who will host EuroDIG next year, but also the country which is currently chairing the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe with 47 member states. And finally, as a country that wants to ensure a digital single market based and led by respect for human rights and the fundamental freedoms of the people in Europe. The priorities of Estonia's chairmanship of the Council of Europe are dedicated to supporting and fostering the organization's work on protecting human rights online, culture and digitalization, advancing children's education and skills, and actions against cybercrime. Estonia, being also a founding member of the Freedom Online Coalition, stands firmly for European values: democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. As the internet crosses our borders and opens up our economies at the speed of light, making these core values fit for the digital age has never been more important. The Council of Europe's Internet Governance Strategy for 2016 to 2019 calls on us to make the internet a safe, secure, open, and enabling environment for everyone without discrimination. We have our work cut out for ourselves. A recent comparative study of 47 member states prepared by the Swiss Institute of Comparative Law indicates that blocking, filtering and takedown of online content without a legal basis remain common practices, including among member states of the Council of Europe. A concrete step we can take is to scale globally the Council's legally binding conventions, such as the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime and Convention 108 on Data Protection, which strike the right balance between sanctions and safeguards. We should not imagine that security and freedom are in conflict. Cybersecurity, like the internet itself, may have grown out of the defense sector, but cyberspace is so much more than a domain of warfare. For the purpose of what we value in Europe, open markets, open societies, the private sector has a huge role in ICT innovation. Giants like Google and Facebook have enormous influence over the way we're using the internet and mobile technologies. More than ever before, we need to put an emphasis on communication and dialogue. We need a two-way conversation with the private sector. As governments, we cannot expect information sharing to be a one-way street from companies to governments. To build and preserve trust, enhance security, and share best practices as well as information about possible threat vectors, governments must also share information with the private sector, which often guarantees the operation of our vital services. Cybersecurity as such needs to become part of our daily life on all levels. We need to go beyond the thinking that any major development in cybersecurity requires a major catastrophe or incident. Security cannot be a luxury item. It needs to be a commodity. Most importantly, we should not forget that cybersecurity and industry is for people. We need to learn to listen to consumer and citizen to the point of view of an end user. Estonia has taken the clear view that governments should help citizens with the tools to keep their data secure. Our citizens can send each other encrypted documents using the national IDs as the private key. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier I mentioned Facebook and Google. Here in Brussels, there is a lot of talk about American internet companies. So let me tackle the elephant in the room. Europe will not benefit from protectionism. Europe may lose too many of our entrepreneurs and unicorns to Silicon Valley, including our very own Skype. But the answer is more innovation-friendly policies and openness. Nor can we afford to use cybersecurity as a proxy for protectionism. Technologies don't have nationality. The development of new technology and technology-driven innovation can only flourish in free market economy. We need to embrace innovative companies, and we need to help them develop. When it comes to standards and industrial policy, we need to strike the right balance. Europe should contribute to standardizing key technologies, but we need to do so in a way which is open and which is inclusive. We need to avoid making standards the enemy of innovation and competition. Last year, the European Commission presented its strategy for the digital single market under the leadership of Commissioner Andrus and Commissioner Oettinger. An open internet alone is not enough. We also need e-commerce and sectoral legislation that promote a single market for e-commerce, an end to geo-blocking and connectivity that support a gigabit economy. We welcome the announcement made by the European Commission together with major internet companies last week to tackle hate speech online. This is a positive example of self-regulation and cooperation. Estonia strongly supports the digital single market work. The objectives of the EU and the Council of Europe complement each other. Estonia would like to see them work hand in hand and in close cooperation with the private sector in order to create stability and prosperity in the digital age. Thank you.